Let's welcome in now our panel to talk more about this. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right on Sirius XM. She's also the co-chair of Project 21. We see Erin Elmore with us too. She's an attorney, Republican strategist, and you can catch her columns on townhall.com and on Turning Point USA. And the CEO of the Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon, sticking around with us as well. Great to have everybody here. Let's talk about what happened in Iowa, Erin. The girl who was arrested is 18-year-old activist Josie Mulville. She is black and was attending a, quote, kill the racist bills protest. But this is not an insurrection, right? Not an insurrection. Or is it?
Well, what we need in America is one standard of justice where everyone is held to the same standard. But unfortunately, in living in these polarized times where Democrats get a pass on absolutely everything, they are held to an extremely different standard, which is much lower. Republicans are obviously racist insurrectionists, and this truly has to stop. Americans do deserve one standard of justice. We saw what happened last summer all over our major cities, and basically the left-wing liberal media said nothing because it was, air quotes, race-related. But when Trump supporters are involved, it's an insurrection, it's a new 9/11, it's a new Pearl Harbor. But you know what it really is? It's simply a way to silence speech on the right under the guise of being afraid and white supremacy. It's really, really sick, and I hope the American people are aware of that double standard.
Stacey, I learned about that story last night on Grant Stenchfield's show. I didn't see it getting a lot of media coverage. I also haven't seen a lot of follow-up coverage this week on Noah Green, who was the Capitol Hill police officer who died last week when a guy rammed his car into that barricade, killing him and injuring one other person. But this incident is also raising questions on how the long remaining fence should stay up around the Capitol. You know, look, you had this situation in Iowa. You know, you got the situation in Washington, D.C. last week. I mean, why are our lawmakers constantly facing this type of stuff?
Well, I mean, so first of all, we have to look at what's actually happening here. We need to do some narrative busting. The creation of the narrative on January 6th that there was an insurrection, which means an actual change in government is the result, is absolutely false. So if we're going to have words mean something, as Sam Sorbo has said with her new book that she put out, she's been all over Newsmax talking about it, then we should adhere to the proper terms. January 6th was a protest. It was also trespassing. They're trespassing as well. If they're there to protest and they don't have a permit in the Iowa Capitol, then they're trespassing. Their protest is not permitted, even though the First Amendment allows them to freely assemble. Some jurisdictions require a permit of some sort. When they're asked to leave by law enforcement and they refuse to obey, that's disobeying the direct direction of or direct order of a police officer. And so, hence, if we just use the terminology we've been gifted with and has been enshrined in the Webster Dictionary, then we know that the thing that happened on the 6th was unusual, but it was not outside of what has happened in Senate confirmation hearings and judiciary hearings and Supreme Court justice, confirmations. Liberals always bust into capitals and take it by storm. And you've seen armed.
Yeah, we saw that in Portland. We've seen that in other state houses as well. It never gets characterized the same. But Seth, when you see this guy, Steve Cohen, the congressman from Tennessee, who famously brought that box of, or whatever, bucket of chicken, he'll be forever known to me as the chicken guy. But, when he's comparing what happened on the 6th of January to Pearl Harbor, I mean, how are we supposed to take this guy seriously?
I mean, you can't take that seriously. That's just such a ridiculous comparison. But, I've got to agree with what Erin said earlier about how it's a double standard. There's a huge double standard with how Republicans are characterized versus how politically correct protests, the protests that are supposed to be happening, are characterized. But I just can't get past the irony of it, that the protest itself was a protest against a crackdown on violent protests, and it got violent. I mean, I just can't get past the irony of that.
Oh, there is, I think irony is dead. I mean, that's what I say all the time because, sometimes when we're talking about hypocrisy, you can't talk about that without irony because, I mean, these are like Halloween costumes sometimes. They're so ironic when you look at this stuff. We got about a minute left real quick. Show of hands, who has plans to read John Boehner's book? No, nobody? Not even just like a hate read, Stacy? Nothing?
I'm sure for a hate read.
He always has been.
Yeah, he always has been a hater, hasn't he? I just wonder, how many, when they make the movie, how many crying scenes are we going to see of John Boehner? John Boehner's liberal tears now, I guess, apparently. Anyway, interesting that he had time between his cannabis business and his Merlot to write a book, but good for him.
Seriously.
I'm going to wait for it to come out on tape and then not listen to it. All right, Stacy, Aaron, Seth, you guys stay where you are. We're coming back.